Since playing Catwoman in Dark Knight Rises, Anne Hathaway has not found a heist film she does not want to partake in. Ocean's 8, The Hustle, and now Lockdown. She's like, hey yo, you got a script with a heist, I want to be a part of it. What's the in for this one? Heist through the pandemic. Why not? Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you'll be among the first to know. So I said in jest, but Anne Hathaway and Chiwetel Ejiofor star in this new film called Lockdown for HBO Max, directed by Doug Liman, who did Edge of Tomorrow. It is a film about two folks, Linda and Paxton, who are married, who decide to call it quits. The second they decide to call it quits, the world shuts down, the pandemic begins, and these stay-at-home orders begin, and thus they are trapped together while just declaring that they no longer want to be around each other. And so this dramatic slash romantic film exists, merged with a back end of a story that eventually becomes a heist film. If you think there are a lot of things happening, a lot of chefs in the kitchen for this as far as genres go, you're not wrong. And I don't mind genre bending. I just wish it wasn't as muddled as what we get here. I think the third act of this film is absolutely fantastic, and a lot of that is built because of the chemistry that both Chiwetel and Anne Hathaway have together. They have chemistry together. And every time that their scenes are happening when they're going through moments and you can tell that there's still something, that's a few sparks still there, or they're going through like utter like I can't stand this person, those are all great. So when it builds up and gets to the final act, it's like, oh, that's a good time. What doesn't work for me are the times that we spend looking at Linda's work life, and I know it all ends up leading up to the resolve, but there are just a lot of sections in this film that just feel like, ah, oh, can we speed this up, or can we get out of this, or can we do this better? And with all of these genres mixed together, being a romantic comedy, a heist film, and then a romantic drama, it leaves one of them, something just feels like if you took it out, this would be a stronger film. And I know gets labeled a lot as being a comedy heist. The comedy is very dark, so it ends up blending back to being a dramatic film, and I don't necessarily think that those are two genres that actually merge to make a very entertaining film. Especially when you're dealing with stuff about the pandemic. I think this is one of the few films that have been filmed through the pandemic that actually handle it in a pretty tasteful way. You get the emotions of being stuck at home. You get the neurosis that goes on. You get the isolation and how you're talking to Zoom. It feels like what we're going through. It's just at a time, and it's probably going to be one of the few films that actually act as like sort of a time capsule of what we're going through. I think it identifies that stuff correctly. I just don't think it puts it into a film form enough that makes the first, I'd say, hour of this film entertaining. Once they get the idea of creating a caper, the film starts chugging along a lot faster. But for this to be a comedy heist film, the first hour of the film does not even put the seed of them being a heist in there, and it's just like, oh god, when do we get there? There are also some pretty cool cameos that just pop out of nowhere. They really have nothing to do with the rest of the story, but they just pop in. You're like, ah, there's so and so. Not sure who we owe the favor, but it's good to see them. It's good to see that they're still well. Doesn't really move the story along, and that's sort of where I sit with for the first hour of this flick. The chemistry that, and I think in a tighter film, the backdrop of the pandemic is fine. I think in a tighter film, this could be less of a mess, but now it just feels like there's just a lot of parts put together to make a film that don't really amount to much. And I wish that if everything was as strong as the third act, we would have a much better cohesive film. But on my scale of once is enough, play it again, Sam, or give me a time stone so that I never have to think about this again. Once is enough. This isn't a terrible movie. I've seen a lot worse, but it's a film that just becomes frustrating after a while. Like, can we get to it, or can we get on to it, or something? Just get to where we need to get to, because I've been here and I get where these people are. I get who these people are. Let's move along. I think what would be more fascinating about this film is watching the behind the scenes of it, because I am of the belief that this film was shot in 18 days because of they're shooting it through the pandemic, they're shooting with protocols, they're shooting it before stuff gets shut back down. And a lot of the times, because you're shooting stuff in such a quick amount of window, and there are some pretty lengthy and meaty monologues between Anne and Ejiofor, that they didn't have all their lines memorized, and some of the stuff is that they're like going off the cuff and kind of going. So it feels like it's more of an exercise in watching a guerrilla style shooting, and I think that I would appreciate more than what we actually did on film. Kudos to everyone for doing that and putting out a product that isn't terrible, but not nearly as bad as that Songbird mess. But it's definitely a film that I'll never revisit this again. But I would love to see, and I would actually love to see Anne Chiwetel and Doug Liman do something else that has a tighter script and just feels a lot more fleshed out than what we got with this job of creating something in such a short period of time. Those are my thoughts. If you've seen Lockdown, go ahead and leave your comments in the comments below. If you haven't, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can leave us an email on HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name that's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. This week we've dusted off the channel and the podcast channel, and brought back a Hollywood Already presents sitcoms through the eyes of WandaVision. So check that out. We look at each sitcom each week of WandaVision and the sitcom that they're paying homage to, and discuss the sitcom of that era and all that stuff. It's a fun show, and we have guest Jamie Jurek on there as well with us. We also have a sister podcast called You Can't Do That Anymore. We talk about classic films like Back to the Future, American Beauty, Beautiful Girls, Gone with the Wind, and discuss what those films did back then through the eyes and lens of what we're doing today in 2021, and seeing if some of those things can still be done. But like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.